I've made use of a few different jigs over the last couple of years in my workshop, mainly for making stuff that can't be made without jigs, like this one that I use for making bow tie inlays on the bandsaw. And since this series is all about improving this workshop, that also includes making life a little bit easier in here. So in today's video, I'm going to be making a mini cross-cutting jig for my table saw and a zero clearance fence for my mitre saw. I'm making the table saw jig to make some cuts not only easier, but also safer. And then the zero clearance fence that I'm going to be making for the mitre saw, I'll use more for finishing work where I want things to be a little bit more accurate, and the zero clearance will mean there's going to be less tear out. And as a little bonus, I'm going to be using the leftover material from making the cabinet for various tools that I did in a couple of previous videos. Starting with the table saw jig, I need to measure the mitre slots for width, so I can cut a piece of hardware to be the runner in this slot. I plane some ash down bit by bit until it glides smoothly in the slots without binding, but also without any side to side movement. I then use my depth gauge to measure the depth of the slot so I can cut a strip to fit. I cut some MDF as a base for the sled, and I can drill some countersunk holes into the rails ready for screwing these onto the base. To attach this in place, I put some washers in the mitre slots to raise the rails off of the surface, and then stick the base in place using the table saw fence to keep things square. I leave this for a couple of minutes, and then once it's dry, I lift it up and add some screws to the countersunk holes to keep things permanently held together. I had these table legs that I was hoping to use on a project, as I was told they were solid oak, but when I collected them I instantly knew that they weren't due to how light they were. To be fair, I did get them for free. The guy said they were solid oak and weighed a ton, but I didn't have the heart to tell him when he passed me a couple of them that they definitely weren't solid oak. Anyway, I knew I would get a use from them, so I thought I'd use them for this jig as a handle. They were a little bit too chunky though, so I ripped one down to find a slight surprise inside. I knew they weren't solid hardwood, but I did think they were solid in construction, I didn't expect the chipboard inside just to be randomly spaced blocks. I thought it would have been a full length. For the purpose of this jig, it didn't actually matter other than looking a little bit worse than planned. But thankfully these aren't going to be on show in the workshop and they'll still function perfectly well. I made a cut in the base where the saw blade will go during use, and then I could attach one end of the handle to the front edge of the base. Then squared it up to the cut I just made, clamping the other side of the handle square and then attaching it to that. And this is where the design of this jig changed. Usually a jig like this would have a back and a front handle, the same as the one I've just put onto the front. This is to obviously hold the base together because it's being cut down the middle. I wanted to see if it was stable enough to use with just one handle, because with the back handle as well, it would seriously limit the depth of cut that I could do using this sled. Unfortunately though, it wasn't stable enough, so I changed the plan and I cut this jig to make two separate ones. One will be used for cutting on the left hand side of the blade and the other will be used for cutting on the right hand side. To be honest, I don't really see myself using the right hand side one, but with me coming this far, I've basically made it already, so I may as well finish it. With the two pieces in half, I had to re-square the handle to the edge and then re-screw them in place. The final thing I did was to add some of my wax oil to the bottom to help it glide on the table saw surface. Then that was the jig, or in the end, two jigs finished. You use this jig for cross-cutting things, and it means you can line a cut mark up to the edge of the jig, and that's exactly where your cut will be. It also acts as zero clearance on the bottom for better quality cuts. So you just line it up, obviously when your saw's on, and you just run it back and forwards. Any cut you make with this, you know, will be perfectly square because the blade and this fence are perfectly square to each other. And for repeat cuts, you can also clamp on a stop block, and then you can make lots of repeatable cuts and they'll be exactly the same size. I've used this quite a few times now and I have to say it's been really handy. So that's that one done. So next up is the Mitre saw fence. I cut another piece of the 18mm MDF for the main base of the fence, and then I added a back piece which will sit against the existing Mitre saw fence. I then glued some MDF support pieces to the bottom, which are used to sit the fence into the exact same position each time. Once the glue had dried, I also added some screws for strength. I set up a depth stop on the Mitre saw, which was just deep enough to score the surface of the Mitre fence, allowing me to cut through any material put onto the fence, but the stop will prevent me from going too deep and cutting through the fence. This has also been an excellent addition to the workshop. It is a little bit big and I can't actually store this on the saw all the time because this is set up only to use at 90 degrees. And as you can see, I store this saw at 45 degrees just to stop it coming out into the room as much. So if it was to live on there, I would have to leave the saw at 90 degrees, but there's plenty of space down there where I can just slide it away. How it works is by adding a surface not only under your workpiece but also behind it with the back fence, so that you get cleaner cuts and less tear out. I'm going to do a cut without the zero clearance here and then one with it. And this is the difference between the two. As you can see, a significant reduction in tear out. It also makes doing accurate cuts really easily, as the saw marks on the fence are exactly where the cut will be. So you could mark up a specific length and then line that up with the saw mark on the fence, and you know that's going to be exactly where your piece will be cut. These are really simple to make. One thing to note, if you are going to be making one, just make sure that your blade and your existing fence are all perfectly square to each other, because if you reference these and they're not square, obviously your new fence isn't going to be square to your blade. Again, another really handy improvement in this workshop, and also an improvement in my workflow and quality, so a win-win really. If you've made it this far in this video and you haven't already subscribed, I'd really love if you'd consider doing so. My goal for the end of 2025 is to try and hit 10,000 subscribers, and it really does help my channel grow without any cost to you other than clicking a button. If you have already subscribed, I do really appreciate it. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.